International spies and secret agents. In the world of international spies and secret agents, it's the latest high-tech weapon that's right out of a James Bond movie. Using high-frequency sound waves, it can incapacitate its victims. And 9 News can confirm 2 visiting CIA agents believe they were attacked right here in Australia.
Is this the sound American diplomats in Cuba heard during possible sonic weapon attacks on the US Embassy?
From late 2016, American and Canadian officials in Cuba began complaining that strange noises were making them sick. The illness was dubbed Havana syndrome, and the symptoms were nausea, hearing loss, memory loss and loss of balance. Some experienced brain trauma. The Secretary of State called foul play.
We are convinced these were targeted attacks. We don't like our diplomats being targeted.
A microwave weapon was suspected. Other incidents were reported in China, Russia and on America's own soil. And the finger was pointed at an old foe.
Which third country would want to disrupt the US presence there? And the logical conclusion is Russia.
Now 9 News has confirmed a report in GQ magazine that a similar attack has occurred here. Late last year, 2 agents from the CIA were in Australia for a meeting with intelligence leaders. One was drawn from the spy agency's top 5 officials. While in their hotel rooms, both reported a strange sound, pressure in their heads and ringing ears. Both became nauseous and dizzy.
If it's true, it would have to be a very precise weapon and a very mobile weapon.
One thing is clear, foreign intelligence activity on our soil is becoming more robust.
This is a very serious battle going on really between the intelligence agencies of the democracies and the intelligence agencies of authoritarian countries.
The first shots in a new Cold War. Chris Ullman, 9 News.
Agents believe they were targeted with a sophisticated... 2 senior CIA agents believe they were targeted with a sophisticated microwave weapon while they were visiting Australia late last year. It's been reported the pair may have been attacked as part of a global campaign by Russia that's left American spies and diplomats suffering from mysterious brain-related illnesses. Political reporter Noor Haider joins us now from Parliament House in Canberra. Noor, g'day. Yeah, pretty bizarre story. Take us through what's happened.
Yeah, good morning, Joe. It is a fascinating story. America's GQ magazine reports that a pair of US CIA agents, including one of the agency's most senior members, travelled to Australia late last year for a clandestine meeting with Australian security officers. Now, while they were in their hotel room, both of the agents experienced sort of pressure on their head. They reported hearing a strange noise and a ringing in their ears. Both of them also became nauseous and dizzy. Now, their symptoms are consistent with what's known as Havana syndrome. This was first documented back in 2016 by American diplomats in Cuba. At the time, about 24 diplomats complained about hearing strange noises, experiencing vertigo, mysterious brain effects, including tiredness that was just not explainable, but also debilitating headaches. Now, exactly what's behind those symptoms remains unclear, or who's behind those symptoms remains unclear. There have been suggestions by researchers that microwaves beamed through windows and doors of buildings could explain these strange impacts on the brain. An investigation by the CIA reportedly placed 2 Russian agents near this hotel in Australia where the 2 CIA agents were staying. This same phenomenon has occurred elsewhere around the world, not just in Australia or in Cuba. It's been reported in China, in Poland, London and Taiwan. Peter Jennings from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute says that if these attacks are proven, Russia is the most likely culprit.
I think what we are seeing here is something that is most likely from the Russians, who seem to, frankly, care almost nothing of the consequences of aggressive intelligence actions. The Chinese tend to be more cautious, but if something was being directed against the American consulate in Guangzhou in China, that it seems to me could only really happen if there was some degree of Chinese complicity in the Russian behaviour.
Now, the Australian federal government has declined to comment on this matter directly, which isn't surprising. However, we do know that the federal government and Australian intelligence agencies do hold serious concerns about the activities of foreign spies on Australian soil. The head of Australia's domestic spy agency only this week warned that the number of spies operating in Australia now is more than that during the Cold War. For what it's worth, the ABC did contact the US Embassy here in Canberra. They declined to comment and referred us to the CIA, which is yet to respond. GQ magazine does, however, have a response from Russia's foreign ministry, or a spokesperson from Russia's foreign ministry. They've reportedly said that they wouldn't confirm whether these victims experienced an acoustic attack, paranoia or Russophobia, and they say that that's a question for doctors.
We're crying out to family members and friends, to local law enforcement and the FBI, to their government, their military, to the private corporations who are involved in this for help, are being met with silence, or even worse, ridicule. They're being accused of being crazy. They're being accused of being paranoid and schizophrenic.
What I can speak to intelligently, though, is that each individual fits the general profile that I'm describing. So they're highly intelligent. They are able to be isolated by whatever means. They normally have some sort of what I would describe as a free mind. They're people that aren't, part of the crowd, so to speak, in the way that they think. They're outsiders. They're what the government would call dissidents or revolutionaries, or people that may be a problem. Some TIs have said that this kind of profile that all TIs fits is empowered individuals, and I would definitely agree with that. The general profile that I'm describing that fits the targets of this program is something that is generated high up within the program. We're talking at the federal government level. We're talking at the highest levels of this social engineering program, where scientists from all over the country and all over the world, they're looking at someone's genetics, they're looking at someone's cognitive abilities, they're looking at someone's genes, they're looking at someone's DNA, they're looking at people's social situation, they're looking at people's career. I've been very surprised that so many PhDs are actually targets of this program, and they're usually PhDs that have gone against the grain in terms of what academia normally teaches, usually within the fields of science and technology. And the reason for this is because people running the program want to cover up certain technologies and certain aspects of science that can lead through to tremendous breakthroughs. These highest levels of science and technology are the sole purview of classified sectors of our government and military, and as a result, it is not, the opinion is that the American people do not have the right to this information, and is in the national security interest of our country to keep it classified. Basically, people are selected from all over the country. We're talking other cities all over America. They are selected for many different reasons. Often it is because they are isolated, they don't have a lot of money, friends, or family, and they also tend to be people that are highly, highly intelligent. The aspects of this technology that they're interested in improving upon have to do with cognitive processes, processing information, and as a result, they want highly intelligent people to be targets of this program. They also tend to target people who are into what I would call alternative research, commonly called maybe conspiracy theories, people that disagree with the government, people that are into researching things like 9/11. Also, they are interested in people that are interested in technology. I have found a high percentage of targeted individuals to be people who either are interested in or have information on highly advanced technologies, usually having to do with directed energy weapons and frequency weapons, the exact kind of weapons that we're talking about here that are used in voice-to-skull, and behavior modification, the works. There's many other aspects to the technology. But once these people are selected, they will have the entire gang stalking / voice-to-skull program run against them. This is detailed in my article, but they will be organized stalked. They will have career sabotage programs run against them to ruin their job. They will have character assassinations campaigns run against them in their neighborhood. They'll be isolated from family and friends as those individuals are turned against them. And they will be isolated slowly and slowly over time using the technology itself, as many of the people freak out, understandably, when they at first don't know what it is. Oftentimes, they end up going to psychiatrists, and false diagnoses of schizophrenia, manic depression, delusional paranoid are rendered against this individual. And it turns out that that's a loophole in the law that they are using to take away people's constitutional rights, as once you are deemed mentally unfit to care for yourself, i.e. you're depressed, delusional, paranoid, etc., they use that, the state or the federal government uses that as an excuse to come in and say that they have to care for you. So I would warn all targeted individuals out there, please do not go to psychiatrists and allow them to render a diagnosis against you, because that is a dirty trick they are using to take away the rights of people all over the country.
Snowden says he was astonished back then at the access he had at his fingertips, most notably including a computer program that, as he put it, could get inside your thought process.
When I think about an instance that really just struck me as, oh my God, we can do this, and that we can do it to anyone, was that people at NSA, analysts, can actually watch people's internet communications, watch them draft correspondence, and actually watch their thoughts form as they type. As you write a message, you know, an analyst at the NSA or any other service out there that's using this kind of attack against people can actually see you write sentences and then backspace over your mistakes and then change the words and then kind of pause and think about what you wanted to say and then change it. And it's this extraordinary intrusion, not just into your communications, your finished messages, but your actual drafting process, into the way you think.
We're talking about weapons, they're in your head. We're talking about weapons of mass control. Joining us today to tell us about weapons of mass control is Dr. John Hall. He's an MD, an anesthesiologist from San Antonio. Because this has been an open secret for some time. It's something that's not talked about very much, although we do have articles here from the Washington Post. We've got articles from Wired Magazine. They've been talking about this here and then in articles since the early 2000s. So you can find some articles going back earlier than that even. And we've got pretty much every branch of the military has got their own little projects, as well as commercial applications.
Oh yeah, mind control technology is one of the most common crimes, at least vocalized or complained about on the internet today. It seems to be getting the least amount of coverage in the major media.
Wow. Well, let me go down the list of some of these that I came up with. We've got DARPA has a sonic projector that was reported on in 2007. Of course, it had been around for quite some time before then. Army has something they call voice to skull. We got the Air Force using microwaves to create sounds at Brooks Air Force Base. We've got the Marine Corps with their Medusa project. We've got the State Department, as reported by the Washington Post in 2005, working on voices implanted in people's heads. We've got a couple of companies, one that has patented something called hypersound. That's American Technologies. Has also got Holosonic Research Labs, also has a patented version. So the military-industrial complex has been all over this. When you see something this wide, this is not just one little research project from one organization. And this is something that 5, 10 years ago, it was being reported on in even mainstream press like the Washington Post, and yet nobody knows about this.
Well, the people who follow the internet pretty closely, and certainly the victims of this technology know about it, but you're right, there's been a lot of research done into how to put voices into one's head. It was found long ago that if you can put a voice into someone's head, you can do several things. If I put a voice that's foreign to your normal thought pattern in your head, that becomes harassment. And the harassment over time will make you display signs of schizophrenia. When you go and tell people that you're hearing voices, we've been patterned to turnkey see that as schizophrenia and not even look to see if there's a legitimate source for it. If I put a voice in your head that's in your voice, and if you pattern a thought, like I tell some of these victims, when you read a book, you're actually hearing your own voice in your head as you read. If I put that voice in your head, then that becomes a thought.
Wow.
And you'll act on those thoughts, and that's how they think that some of this is being used for subliminal control.
Wow.
And that was used in the field of battle. The Voice of God weapon, which is actually called SQUAD, or Silent Sound Spread Spectrum, was used in the first Operation Desert Storm. That was one of those scenarios where 1,500 Iraqi soldiers disassembled their weapons, got to their knees, and surrendered to 150 Marines who didn't have enough slip ties to tie them all together, because, and this was admitted, that they used SQUAD to put the voice of Allah in their heads to tell them to surrender.
Wow. Well, it's always like any technology. It can be used for good or it can be used for evil. I don't know if there's any good use for putting voices in people's heads, but certainly what this reveals is the dark side of people that are involved in this connection. Now, talk to us about how you distinguish between something that is artificially being beamed in, voices being beamed into you with this technology, versus somebody who really is schizophrenic.
I'm glad you asked that, because I especially being a medical doctor, I don't want to come across as everybody hearing voices is being victimized by technology. Certainly schizophrenia exists. For one, schizophrenia is not quite as common, I think, as the press has led people to believe. It's still, severe schizophrenia is still a relatively rare disorder. Most of the victims that I've worked with can pinpoint the day that they started hearing voices and the day that they noticed organized stalking, people following them around from their home to work. Most of the victims that we've had questionnaires filled out on and talked to are in their late 30s to early 40s. Typically, schizophrenics are identified from 18 years old to 28 years old, maybe a little later in females, but almost always at a young age. Typically, those people are described as never having been quite normal. You don't see it in high-functioning, educated individuals who all of a sudden turned 40 years old and acutely became schizophrenic overnight. Also, if you talk to schizophrenics about what they're hearing, typically it's God or angels or deities or garbled voices like you hear in a subway. The people that are being victimized by this technology are hearing the voices of people that are obviously watching them. Oftentimes they'll know the names of these voices because it's a two-way communication system. So they're hearing the people doing the surveillance talk to each other as well as talk to them. Typically it's their whereabouts in a room is being described, what they're dressed like is being described.
So it's kind of a form of harassment then.
Well, and that's exactly what the loose term for it is, electronic harassment.
So they're not necessarily trying to pretend that they're God. They're just really trying to harass this person and push them over the edge.
Exactly.
Into doing something. Well, that's interesting. So to sum it up, somebody who has real schizophrenia, it's going to be something that is very early in their life, a consistent pattern behavior from very early in their life, whereas somebody that is that is having this done to them, they're going to have a sudden onset of that.
Exactly.
So they've been perfectly normal, then somehow and later in life, all of a sudden, like you said, a switch has been flipped.
Exactly. And we've done surveys on thousands of these victims, and most of them are educated. A lot of them are doctors and lawyers, educated people that were high functioning, that were successful in their careers, and one day started hearing voices, started being stalked, and watched their lives spiral downhill after that. And the other
kind of I'm sorry.
Oh, sure. The other thing with schizophrenia is schizophrenia does respond to treatment. You can put schizophrenics on medication and they'll improve. People that are being victimized by this technology, you can put them on any array of the medications used for schizophrenia or delusional disorder, and they still hear the voices, they still get stalked, and they still get attacked.
Wow. Wow.
Once they've fooled your neighbors into thinking whatever they were planting in their head, they can now borrow their house and say they need to keep an eye on you with some surveillance equipment. That surveillance equipment could be a directed energy weapon. When they point it at your head, you can sometimes hear a frequency, and when they turn it off, your ear will be ringing for about 30 seconds. In one of the pictures you will notice the direct energy weapon all focuses at one point, the victim's bed. They like to do this when you're sleeping because you don't move around, and they can have it fixed pointing in one direction. Just imagine someone was pointing a microwave gun at you, for example. That's a directed energy weapon. They will slowly cook you and give you cancer, for example. The parts of the body they most like to target is the head, eyeballs and groin and reproductive parts. When they did this to me, they basically said through voice to skull, they are here to kill my children.